Okay, we might get underway. Thanks for coming along today to a very rainy Sunday. We're hoping that at the end of this we may be able to show some antennas maybe outside if the weather's kind to us. So, but can I please thank Peter VK7KPC and also Kim VK7KB. And also, we have a huge contingent from the north here as well. We've got Lewis and Andre and Idris and Stefan and Peter and Kay, who are living it up at Richmond, I understand. To show the vast array of military radios. And I also understand there is some others from, now I don't actually know your name.
Well, local.
From local, yeah.
Well, yeah, only up the road a bit.
Yeah, and it's Derek, isn't it? Dennis, it's Dennis. So we've got a 22 set, I think.
FS6, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
122 set.
122 set, yeah. So, fantastic. So what I will do is I'll hand over to Peter initially, and then I'll hand to Kim, and then I'll hand to Dennis as well. Now I'm going to be trying to go between the stream and also the back here and steering the camera. It's the first time we're actually using our presentation camera right at the moment, which is what you can see here. So I'm hoping I can zoom in on a few things as we go through. So over to Peter. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Okay, we'll start here at the low end of the tower range. This is a FSE 58 radio from Germany. We've got power ranges of 10 milliwatts and 50 milliwatts, which is a vast amount of power there. And it's designed as a section radio, so it's just for talking between your section, which is about 10 people at the most, and so you're not going to be very far away from each other. Standard sort of handset. The really strange part of it is the aerial system, which is on the helmet. There's a matching unit in here to tune it. And then you can put that around there so you don't get caught in trees. It's a Danish helmet, it's not a German one, but it fits. So obviously FM, it can also run off 24 volt supply from your vehicle. And fortunately we have this little 3-pin connector that works with it, so amazing what you find in your junk boxes. The batteries are a 6-volt Nico battery, which I happened to find 3 of in a piece of test equipment I had.
So that's original.
They're the original type of batteries.
Yep.
That just
configuration. Yep.
I happen to have them in something else that, strange enough, came from the same country. It's a single channel unit, but it's got space for, it holds 10 other crystals, so you can change the crystal and then just go through a simple tuning process to change it to another frequency.
What frequencies?
It's currently on 51 megs, so it's in that low VHF band.
Yep.
And it's got a carrying bag, so that sort of hangs around there. And
so would you physically change the crystal to change your frequency?
yeah, you've got to take it apart. Yeah,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
I did have some documentation. That's part of the circuit diagram. I'll pass that around if people want to have a quick look.
Is there a year?
But it's in Italian, so it might be interesting. Okay, so that's a German sourced one. Moving across the channel.
What era would that be from? What era is that from?
Cold War probably. It's all transistor, but yeah. This is a Clansman PRC-50. We've got some information on the web if we need it, but again, it's sort of a section radio, so you're not expected to talk to the moon on it. You can either run with a handset or a headset. It came with this sort of flexible aerial here. Also, you can use this telescoping type aerial there on it, or a trailing length of wire about this long that hangs off the back. The carrying device is some straps that you either strap it on your back or down here. Again, I said it's about 2 watts. You've got 25 kilohertz tuning steps. It's currently sitting on 52.825, which is I think a local frequency. But
I think so.
and to access the repeater, I'd have to change the megahertz. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, VK7KB. And it comes out on that one that's on the receive frequency. So we've got the ability to work repeaters with it if they don't have tone squelch. The other thing they have with these is the thing called a whisper function. And when you switch to that, it drops or increases the sensitivity of the microphone and drops the audio output level. So when the bad guy's just over there, you can still use the radio. So it's one of those military type things. So you've got, with your selection switch, you've got off, low power, loud or whisper or unsquelched. So 14 volt battery pack, NiCad type 1. Or this one which holds C cells. So when they're hard to find, you've got an option. They were originally designed to have a dry cell pack, but it doesn't look like they were ever produced. It was probably a requirement of the military at the time, but by the time the things got in production, again, we have an instruct complete manual for it. Well, not a technical manual, but an operation manual. So if you want to pass that around and have a quick look. Okay, so any questions on this one? Well, I missed something about the
Era?
No.
What era is it?
again, Falklands,
Okay. So late.
Northern Ireland, sort of
70s to 80s type.
70, 80, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, moving right along. This one is a PRC-351, or if you've got the 20 watt amplifier with it, it's a PRC-352. It's got a NiCad battery pack. That's 4 watts. When you've got that attached to it, you've got 20 watts. But if you're using the amplifier, you can't really use the manpack aerial. Probably something about RFI or something. But again, you can use either that aerial or this aerial with that set. Again, it's got the whisper function, the same sort of channel steps. Again, we've got frequency selection switches on the side. You can also run this remote off some telephone wire to a handset over there, so if you want to have this sitting somewhere a bit higher and you down a little bit lower where it's a bit safer, you can do that. That's the carrying frame for it. Another option is a hand generator to recharge your batteries. When you're using the hand generator, they had that's a 4 amp hour battery. They had a 1.5 amp hour battery, which is a bit narrower, that was used when you were running around with one of these. Again, you've got the option of the handset, headset, or speakers. You can also, this can also mount in a vehicle and run into the vehicle intercom system. So imagine this stuff and then double it again, because there's all these other boxes that allow you to have the driver to have a connection, the gunner and the APC to have a connection. It just grows and grows. Okay, talking about sitting somewhere safe with it, you have,
I'll work that out.
this is they call a ground spike antenna. The ground spike's somewhere safe, but it is basically a spike there and just jab it into the ground, properly somewhere up high, run a cable back to your radio. This part is to attach it to the portable mast, which we may be able to see later if it stops raining. And what they do is there's a fixed length cable that goes from there to an inductor, and there's 3 lengths of cable available, and they match the antenna through the inductor, so it fixes there. I'll put a SWR meter on it, only shortly matches it. Okay, again you've got, this aerial is made up of sections, so you, because you've got coverage from 30 megs to 70 megs, you've got a choice of 3 lengths. There is a later version of this where the aerial sections are about half the size, so you can get a bit better tuning. Okay.
Who makes them, Peter?
That's made by
Plessy?
Plessy, basically. I know Plessy made that one, but they're probably made by Mel or somebody. There's various companies.
Racal.
And they've got this nice little sign on this with an M/I, which says some parts are metric, some parts are imperial. Again, handbook. So. Okay, moving right along.
They're getting thicker, going from one sheet to...
Okay, any questions on that one before I move on? Another little part about it is you can put a tuning unit on the front of your Land Rover with an aerial on it, and then with another couple of boxes you can fire up, retune your aerial on the front of your Land Rover, whatever frequency you're using. So it's a motor driven tuner. So it's, but you need to have a Land Rover that's working to show that very well. Mine's not quite that movable. Okay. Next one, we've got our PRC-320, which is a HF manpack. Lightweight. Again, uses the same batteries. Again, you can use the same generator to charge the batteries. 3 to 30 megs in 100 hertz steps. SSB, CW wide, CW narrow and AM. It's got an inbuilt tuner for matching your whip aerial. This device on the top here is what they call a selective unit RF or SURF, and that's to if you're using a couple of radios in up the top end of the band, it sort of gives us a bit of isolation. So down on 7 megs you just bypass it. On the back it's got this nice little chart that says if you're using that aerial, set your tuning initially to these numbers, and you're in the right ballpark. So that makes it fairly easy. A recent purchase, a Morse key. Strap on your foot for Morse, so high power 30 watts, low power 3 watts. What else have we got? Like I say, you've got your manpack aerial. You've got aerial on the front that you can put on your Land Rover, or you've got a 5.4 metre wire aerial that goes up to the mast, or you put this whip on top of the mast, which becomes a 7.4 metre antenna. And again, you've got the initial tuning steps here. There are two types of ground counterpoise available. That one, or the super duper one, where each counterpoise unrolls.
Nice. Wow.
As long as you don't break the little screw thread, you're right. If you're doing a dipole type aerial, you've got a centre connector, BNC type coax, your antenna elements with nice metric length markings. Again, the chart tells you how far to wind out for each frequency. And because you've got a coil of wire at the end of the element, it's not quite the 234 on frequency calculation. What else have we got? Nice carrying backpack.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't make it any lighter, but it is definitely more comfortable than that style, which is what they originally came with. Again, you've got a BNC type connecting cable for running it out. The green military wire that's used for everything. And
And DMI on the front as well.
yeah. Now you can get a, because it's upper sideband only, you can get a little adapter board to go inside if you're going enough to open it. And what they do is they just have a slightly different frequency local oscillator. And so you've got to decide whether you're going to put another hole in the front or switch, or use one of the CW positions maybe to activate it. They'll give you lower sideband as required. I used this on QR low power RD contest a couple of years back, and got enough contacts to make it a certificate, so it can't be too bad. And again, user manual. There is circuit information available on the web, so you can fix it, though as with most of these things, a lot of the transistors are made out of this material called unobtainium, which means it's very hard to find.
Any luck with Russian transistors? And
Mine's still working, so I haven't to worry. But yeah, no, there's the synthesizer gives problems. Some of the capacitors give problems. People have experimented making synthesizers with more modern devices and then putting them in. But yeah, you've got a couple of power supplies that give out 110 volts inside, so you've got, it's not just all 12 volt. But yeah.
What's the 110 volts used for?
Hmm?
What, sorry, Peter. What's the 110 volts used for?
It's in the, I'm not sure that it's in the synthesizer or in the RF stage, but yeah.
It's pretty key.
But yeah, so there's a lot of switchboard stuff. And again, you can run a pair of telephone wires from this out to a box, to a handset in a safe spot if you wish. sure as you see. Now I think from memory, it's been a while since you used it. But yeah, you've got a box that you hook into this and then hook through. So again, it'll mount on the in the Land Rover. And yeah, so any questions on that one? There's plenty of the greenradio.de website has got lots of pickies and info, and if you put PRC-320 in there, you can find lots of info and stories about people that have had things broken and they've got to try and fix them.
Yeah, we'll put the links in the description with the video.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's some of my collection. There's a couple of American ones that I didn't bring down because the truck was almost too full. But,
Oh,
yeah.
and there's the aerials, and antennas. So.
That's the antennas outside. So,
Yep.
yes, they're all work. They all get used. It's not as much as I'd like to, but and yeah, like I say, I can access 6 metre repeaters, provided there's no tone squelch. Okay, I'll pass on to Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
The MI type thing is a very British situation. Perkins engines, everything on the inside is metric, everything on the outside is imperial because it was originally a Mercedes engine, but the flywheel and the bolts of the crankshaft are imperial. You know, things like that, just crazy. So yeah, just the way it was, or the way it probably is in some areas. Okay, let's start with the oldest that we have here at the moment, except for there's radios up the back that are much older, but the oldest of mine. This is an A-510. Now, anybody who was in cadets in the army would have probably seen them. They were actually designed in the very early 50s. This one's about 53, 54. It's about the same age as me, which is a bit scary. And the Australians decided there was a gap in their communications, and they actually, a bit like now, they wanted to be more independent. So they came up with this concept, AWA, and there's, again, we'll put all these links up. This is an article by an American historian who's a military radio guy. There's about 10 pages about this particular radio, and he talks about it, a crystal-controlled, low-power, lightweight transmitter receiver designed primarily for use by long-range infantry patrols, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And he actually waxes lyrical about it. They were a very sophisticated radio in their day, and they were used, when were they in cadets? When did they eventually get?
In the 60s for me.
Yeah. So they were used for about, I think, 10 years by the military. Then sideband came out, which would have knocked them on the head, and they went through the reserve, then they went through into cadets. So you've got two boxes, Joel. Actually, that's an umbilical that goes behind you or in front of you. Front. Okay, there we go. See, the users. So what we have here is the key. It's lightweight #1. So it's an Australian key. So these are a really nice little radio. Crystals in here, and they're a crystal about the size, as somebody pointed out to me the other day, of CB radios. Little tiny ones, not only crystals. Which is a job. Come on, edge, come on, over the turns. So there we go. 4 crystals.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's actually, it's quite light for its day. 2 kilos, that's not bad.
And that's only half of it.
That's only half of it, but then that doesn't include lots of batteries in the back. But it's a really neat little concept, and it was probably the first real manpack that was around. It's going to drive me crazy. I'll do that in a minute. So it comes with the webbing, and you end up with one on each side. So you've got your receiver and your strap up higher. Oh, there you go. Oh, come on. You can come and demonstrate.
No.
Up high, that high. Okay, I always thought it went lower.
Went on strap.
On straps, that's right, there you go.
Shoulder
So
strap.
we have an expert.
That's right.
And one of the reasons they were liked was because the weight was lower than the heavy radio on your back. And so it kept the profile down, which was good, and you could actually do other things.
You could still have a backpack.
And you could still have a backpack, yeah. And you could still use a weapon.
We were strong then.
Oh, God. Okay, here we go. Headset. It looks like it's been eaten by rats, but it's just the rubber. Not surviving the times very well. So this has got basically most of its CES, yeah, complete with little toolkit, bits and pieces, which has got lights and crystal extractors and bits and pieces, which is quite good. A lot of them were missing an awful lot. The light, do you ever use your light? No. And then on the other side we've got the other box, which is there, and the receiver. So it's all quite nice. Now there's a clever way they work that they actually use the capacity of the lead between the two radios to transfer some RF through to simplify the design. And so I haven't got to the bottom of how they actually do it, but it's interconductor capacitance. There's a bit of signal leakage from one side to the other. I think they use it for a local oscillator or something like that. That's another day job. So really well renowned. And there's some doc out you have to read up. Then in terms of bits and pieces, again, the dipole. This one doesn't have numbers. It's just got a label every foot, and quite clever. Bingo.
Transistors? Or
Valve. Oh, sorry, valves. 1.4 volt filament valves, so like IT4, 3VV, that are valves. And they're 4 and 5 valves. The output stage is 2 valves in parallel, so it's about 3 or 5 watts on a good day. Dry cell batteries, which is a bit of a pain. So one day.
It's a 1.5 volt battery on one side and
That's
45 and
right.
90, I think, on the other side.
Yeah.
67 and a half or
There's
something.
a 6.5, which is the bias.
Yeah, probably a bias as well.
So when you said these were killed by SSB, so these were just straight AM?
Yeah, straight AM,
Yeah.
AM CW.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, same sort of story as with the more modern radios. There's your little table. You've got the length of wire and you've got the frequency in megs ranging from 3.3 to 10.4. So look, quite a good little radio in their day. And very, very progressive, but it was a technology thing, probably finished them off.
Before you go to sleep.
Feed line, just twin core parallel feed line, it's 75 ohms nicely. That's the other one of those, and then this one is a single wire antenna to run as a vertical up a tree, or a sloping up a tree, whatever you want to do, as you can see there. It's a bit hard to see, but you can have a look later. And again, it's got marker points so you can shorten it up to the length that you want. And so the way they shorten it is turn the top over to bring it down to the length you need. And in fact, that sort of technique, this antenna is actually a bit later. That's what was the series after? That might have even been a 22 set series or something a bit earlier, or it could be British because it's got a ZA number. I've no idea, but again, it's pretty universal. There's your frequencies. Oh, number 62 set, sorry. There. There's your frequencies and there's your lengths, and it goes out to 100 feet, and the minimum is 25 feet as the frequency goes up. So by doing that, because you were tuning your antenna for the frequency you want to use at, it meant the radio was tuning stages were far more simplified because it was always working into an appropriate impedance. Just kept it simple. And most people could understand that. If they couldn't, well, they probably got shot. Because they're up there fiddling with their antenna, and bad guys lurking around the corner.
Occupational
I was
hazard.
just thinking actually, with all this antenna options, just setting it up with bombs going off around you might have been a...
Yeah, it would have been pretty exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose if you're wandering around as bad guys, you'd be running just a whip. It would be more if you're running some sort of small command centre.
Yeah.
But they were serious enough about this radio, they used them in a Malayan conflict, and they took them over to Malaya into the jungles with a contingent of Australians to actually test them, and they found they were getting 3 to 5 miles through heavy jungle, which is pretty good. Now, there's a heap of stuff. Ray Robinson has got a lot of stuff on his website. There's some stuff on the American websites. We'll put links up for them. If you wanted, you could read for 3 nights. It's just pages and pages and pages of stuff. Really interesting little radio. So if you come to more modern manpacks, we've got a couple of RACALs here. And this one's a SquadCall, and it's a thermoplastic case. Alan's used those down south, and you never actually had to use it as a floaty, did you?
No.
Yeah, they will float. It was one of the marketing things actually, that they would float. So handset, like a telephone handset. This is sort of the precursor of the whisper technology, because when you've got it to your ear and you're talking close, you can actually talk quite low if you're in a noisy environment, and you can still hear what's going on, and you don't have to yell, which is pretty convenient. So that's why they go to handsets, and a lot of the new military-style radios still use those. So it's only a few watts, about 5 watts from memory. All discrete components. It's a SquadCall. The first concept of a manpack came out of South Africa. It's called a RS-14 or something, and they made them themselves, and then they ended up in England, and RACAL spotted them. RACAL wasn't doing very much at the time. They were sort of a bit in limbo, and they bought the design, and that radio came out of that. So that's the first British European manpack for HF. And it's,
So is that sideband?
yes, it's sideband, and it's crystals. So
Sideband and
crystals, yeah. Okay.
How many channels?
This one's 29.
Yeah, crystals.
Yeah.
Crystal for each channel.
Yep. And so you've got AM, CW, and SSB.
What year was that?
This was 60s, early 60s. And then the next one across is the Sencal 30, and there was a 20 and a 30, and they're synthesised. So that was the next generation. They actually kept RACAL going quite nicely. They made over 10,000 of these, whereas those ones are probably a couple of thousand. There's a lot of commonality, like with the microphones, the antenna mounts, and the basic sort of layout for these radios as they evolve through. And you look at them, they're all fairly similar. Decadic tuning, so because you're only covering HF through to 30 megs, and it had to be simple for people to use. And you can always go chonk, chonk, chonk and count how many clicks you're going through, even if you can't see it. And it was, they're a bit like a Land Rover. You know, you just know they're there and you know how they work, and so people can use them under adverse conditions. Give you the options of antennas, so you can go through an ATU, you can go for a wideband antenna, and then you've got a 1.6 to 3 meg output and a 3 to 30 meg output. So there'll be some inductance inside to cover the antenna for the lower frequencies, and a bit of tuning on top as well. So yeah, quite a neat little radio. Mixture of metal and plastic case. It's seen the better time than that one. Yeah, so that's an evolution later. So that would be into the 70s, late 60s into the 70s.
And still floaty? Still...
No, they're not floaty. They're sinky. If you're going to fall overboard, ditch your radio. Or else tie a floaty to the top of the antenna.
And I assume that metal bit at the bottom's the battery.
That's the battery, yeah. Yeah, these ones, the batteries are quite weighty. Well, it's going lithiums. The battery pack. Now, if somebody knows something about the military, this one was 2AFDS, whatever that means. Whichever section. Oh.
Who's out of the military?
This one also came down from Queensland. I don't know where it was demobbed. So there you go.
Kim, that was number 2 Security Forces Squadron RAAF.
Okay, there you go. So there you go. A couple of kilos of battery.
Where's your thanks?
Yeah. So these are NICADs and they're dead. So it's the battery case will actually open up. There's a central screw through and come through with an O-ring, so that'll be easy enough to convert over. Sorry. So yeah. So then we go into a little bit more modern. This is QMac, and these were late 90s into the 2000s. And the guy who designed these was based in WA, and he'd come to Australia. He was a POM, came to Australia, and he was an RF engineer. And he was working with Barrett, then he went out on his own to build these radios, and they're actually really quite clever. Let's have a bit of a look down here. I'll just ditch the power cable because it's easier to handle without a power cable. They're built on a couple of boards, which I'll hold up in a minute. You can have a look at it. And they're built as a system. Now, all of these military radios have a system, as Peter showed us. You'll have a series of antennas, and you'll have the hand generator, and you'll have often a kit to install into a vehicle, and then there'll be often amplifiers if you want to run as a fixed site radio. So these are these are fundamentally short haul type radios, just in the battlefield or a few miles back. They do talk about running skywave with dipoles if you want a longer distance, but it's that classic thing that you use lower frequency short antennas when you're in close and you don't have to talk very far, but in a situation where you talk further, you use a dipole up high, or running as a sloper or an end-fed to get the distance and the higher frequencies. So this is the transceiver, so QMac HF-90, which is quite cute. So claim to fame, under a kilo, and they'll run from 12 to 28 volts, high power, low power. They did advertise them as covering HF fairly well, but the early radios ran switching components for their output stage, and they tend to roll off above 12 megs. The later ones, they went to a really good IRF, something I really can't remember what the actual device is, and they'll hold full power up to 30 megs, which is good. That's the little tuner that goes with it, and that's for the sloping wire antenna that's supplied with them. And there's one up there. We'll have a look outside later with a bit of a fiddle. There's a few around where people have tried to use them with other types of antennas, and they find that the results aren't very good. I think the actual, this was, because it was designed as a system, was actually engineered for the antenna they sold with them. And so if you stay with that length of antenna at the appropriate frequencies, you work quite well. So, and then a ground down to ground. Now, the grounds are interesting because there's, in some of the military ones, the signals guy would wander along with a piece of wire trailing behind to give him a counterpoise. I'll think of this bloke's name in a minute, I'll have to look at my phone. When you're actually running a manpack, it's your capacitance to the ground that's giving you the ground return. And so there's been all this discussion of trying, it's the bloke in Melbourne, the guy who...
Yeah, Peter Parker.
Peter Parker, you sort of see Peter Parker standing inside water.
The wave tenor.
Yeah, and the wave tenor and all that sort of stuff. But the manpacks, one of the things they did was they actually put a metallic mesh inside the frame, or inside the double layer, if you like, at the back of the manpack, so it coupled to your body more effectively. So the RF went down through you and into the ground. So it's sort of like a, there's some of the research that people have done is pretty impressive. He also produced a little antenna tuner, automatic one, was about a square. They went through multiple generations. The design is very neat. Things like, this is the sloping antenna that you put up like up a tree or whatever, and tie it back to your vehicle. So the clip's there, you hook it onto your vehicle, that gives you your reference point. To deploy it, this spike actually happens to be a ground spike, but it also becomes the axle. So when you wind it out, or wind it back in, you've got the whole system there as a system. And the same with the dipole antennas. It's just really neat. That's an adapter box, which is some sort of loading arrangement. And you can also go through and with the links in there, change the length of the antenna for higher frequencies. So you use, it's the old story, full length antennas, low frequencies, shorter antennas as the frequencies go up. It looks neat. A lot of the stuff that we read in our books, and there's a copy down there of Moxon's book that I acquired here at one of our garage sales one time. It's a fantastic book. And when you look at the principles used by the military, they've come through to amateurs for field day operations or mobile operations or for portable operations. And the basic principles really haven't changed very much in, what, 60, 70 years now. It's quite impressive. That's a little antenna tuner that's been around for a while too. SGC.
We're familiar with those.
You're familiar with those?
There's a few of them in the club.
Yeah, they're quite nice. They work quite well. Just run on AA cells, and they're latching, so there's no power when they're not tuning. And they do have a little bit of consumption, I've noticed, because I've checked the batteries out of that one and they're flat, so it's no battery.
You get 5 years.
4 or 5 years. And these are the boards there, the QMac. So switch mode power supply in it to crank the voltage up to 50 volts for the finals, and the finals in there onto the heat sink. The filters for the changing frequencies go through as you crank up. They click through, and they're nice little relays filters. Yeah, look beautifully made. And that's the logic board. There's quite a few revisions of software, like maybe 30 on the page in the manual. The manual's over there. And he went through and they developed them and they resolved their bugs, but they also gave them more functions. So there's things like S meters and other forms of tuning and adjustments that you can do with the radio that so it's front panel controllable, or you can lock the front panel down so it'll only do what you want it to do. Very versatile. And there on the back, 10 to 28 volts, negative earth. So yeah, really neat. I'm quite impressed. And he sold the business back to Barrett, which is really amusing. And the story was that Barrett, what I've been told anyway, they didn't buy it for this radio, but he'd done a VHF version of this radio, and that was readily marketable to the military, and that's why they took the company back over. But I bought some new Barretts recently, the manpacks for down south, and they're more like this size, and they're quite heavy. They've got lithium batteries in them, which offsets the weight. They're very versatile radios, but in some ways, this little radio, for what it does for its size, is remarkable. And the case is aluminium. It's a single extruded case. Chop it off, front panel, back panel. Everything goes together. It's watertight. It's really, really clever. And so again, it comes with the CES, a couple of antennas, the whip. That one has got a low frequency adapter on it, which effectively puts a bit of inductance and extends the whip out a bit longer for more efficiency at lower frequencies. Yeah, it's really neat. Plus dipoles, plus. Yeah, so like there's a lot of stuff. And again, you've got the hand generator with with a strap to go around the tree, or I think some of the Pommy stuff had a spike. You can hammer it into the tree, and you sort of.
Yeah, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it with violence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, with the butt of your rifle.
Are they still sort of software programmed? Are they QMacs or?
Yeah, serial. Serial.
You can still do them though.
You can still do them. I bricked one day because I was trying to do it with two newer computer, and even though the baud rate for the RS-232 was correct, there was something in the way it spat it out, and the radio went feral and went blonk. I don't want to work anymore.
That's like I've got an old Barrett that's like that.
Yeah.
You can't do anything with it.
Which
really.
model Barrett?
550.
Okay, you have a 952.
Yeah, the FM80s, the RM80s, etc.
No, you need something very slow to do it.
Oh yeah.
You need like a Wen at 98 machine, or a really early 7, but you just need a slow processor. And I've got a laptop that belongs to a friend, and his works perfectly with the radios. But if you try my 7 at home's fine because it's a radio that's 12 years old, well, Win 7 radio. Computer. But if you come onto one of the modern laptops, like running 8 or whatever, no. Like 8. And 8's not that modern either.
There is a program that slows it all down and makes it look like a really slow serial record.
Well, that'd be handy.
Because I've got a Toshiba laptop for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
It's slow, it's old, it's Windows 95.
The problem is they try to negotiate a higher rate than what the device can handle.
So
7 and DOSBox will do it.
Yeah.
So are they basically doing it as a blast and waiting to put the average down?
The problem you've got is that modern UART chips, they don't like being told what their speed is.
Oh, okay.
So they deliberately go, oh no, I'm going to negotiate, and they'll try. The default negotiation, I think, going back a bit, is 115k, and then it goes stops there.
So if you're trying to do 9600 or something, it's a bit of a battle, isn't
and
it?
if you're talking to like a Cisco switch, it doesn't care, it'll wait and say, no, I'm going to wait until you drop down, but anything else than that.
Yeah, so the processor, the processor's not going to wait, is it? And also there's been 3 different processors. So the very newest ones of these is probably the most flexible and the most available, except that the processor had a really short life, and something else took over, or there was a major change in architecture. And so they're not very common. So probably the middle series is the most versatile, I would think, parameters. There's a few around out there. There's one for sale at the moment on VK Hamper's studio. You should be getting it for half of what the guy's asking. So I reckon, good. They're pretty impressive, and they're nice and light. There's a bloke in Newcastle's got one. He's a deer hunter, and he carts it around with him. He's very happy having it. And a couple went to the States for these 2 guys who are also hunters, amateurs and hunters. And they were fantastic because it's no weight at all. They talk to they're 2 brothers, and they're in different parts of the valley at the same time. They can talk to each other. You can imagine what the conversation would be like. Okay, heavy duty up here in the corner. This is GRC-106 that was ex-Australian military. The HF-90 is probably the newest I've got here. So that's Vietnam era. General Dynamics out of the States, and was built as a field radio and also used by the military as a vehicle radio. And in the Land Rovers, it was sitting behind the, so their canvas tops, it's classic FFR, bit of a radio Land Rover, like Pete and I've got. So they were sitting up behind the bulkhead, immediately behind the front seat. And the antennas were on the side mounted. And in the manual, there's a couple of things about these radios. It talks about voltages within appropriate antenna lengths of 5,000 volts of RF. And so you sort of think, well, you're sitting there operating a radio that's got 5,000, only a half a metre away. But then the other thing is a lot of them that came out of the States didn't have any meters in them because the meters are actually radioactive. So when I got this one, the guy who I got it from sent me a Geiger counter as well.
Radium.
Yeah, so that's why they decreed them as unsafe to sell to the general public. And in one of the manuals, on the very first page or two, there's this picture, warning radioactive. I'll try and find it, but I won't be able to find it. But it's the classic, it's in there, have a look. But it's that classic, radioactive sign, like be careful. So they say, don't damage the meter, don't do this, don't do that, and don't dispose of it. That one too?
That will have one in it.
Yeah, okay.
Because we had a 122 set in the corner here,
Yep.
and we brought up a Geiger counter, and something was triggering it, and it came to the meter.
Yeah.
Radioactive, is it?
Yep. Yeah. So don't have your radio.
Radium on the pointer.
Yeah, on the pointer. What the old learn?
And also on the marks behind.
Yeah,
I was watching stuff
Yeah.
earlier.
you used to have lead far from your head, on the bed.
Yeah. So anyway, the boxes are, getting distracted as is always the case. The bottom box is the receiver and exciter. So I think it's about 100 milliwatts out, something like that. Again, HF, it's fully synthesised, so 28,000 channels, kilohertz apart. Then above that, the next box up is a 400 watt linear. And the box on top, would you believe, is the RTTY terminal. So, how things have changed. Yeah. Yeah. So, pretty flash American stuff. And they were like ridiculously expensive in the day, and I can't remember, it's like 30 grand or something. Like it was just, you think of a figure and you double it, and that's where they were in US dollars. Under an amp on receive, about 60 amps on transmit. Again, the privacy style handset, remote speaker, and what's interesting about a lot of the American military stuff is that they use surface connectors, so there's no pins. So as you install the connector in and it moves in, it wipes the surface, and they're spring loaded a little bit, not much, a little bit. Yeah. So the idea is that if you get them dirty, you can just wipe them off and they're underway, and it's really hard to damage as long as if you've got pins and sockets that fill up with crud, and it's quite clever. So compared with the normal military amphenol connector or whatever where you've got pins, this is sort of the more ruggedised version. So they do use the other pins, like this is a really weird. This is the power cable. This is the small power cable. It's only for the RTTY converter. These radios were often known as RattRigs, and their sites were known as RattRigs. There's an American corruption of RTTY radio. RattRigs, RATT rigs. And so they've got the power cable like that, but they screw in, like they're not going to come out, and that's the way it works. And this thing in between the two radios, it's the multi-pin connector between them, and that's known as a dog bone for obvious reasons. It looks like a dog bone. The early ones of these were germanium, as good as germanium semiconductors, and they're a bit of a problem because they're decaying and dying. The later ones were silicon. But American stuff's funny, like one serial number 30, I think. So you think it's a really early radio. But then above it'll have an ID which says something like serial number 30, order number CG90192, blah, blah, blah. And this one down here, I can't read it, that one I can. This one's serial number 14, and order number CG3401. Now, what the American military will do is they put things out for tender, and so that might be number 30 out of that order. So unless you can get back to some of their documentation to find out, or look at the components inside and find out how old it is, I think one's 69, the RTT converter 69. You don't actually know whether you've got an early radio or a later radio. And everything's modular, so they're designed, the American stuff is designed to be field maintainable, then depot maintainable, then sort of back to factory maintainable, and the manuals are there, you know, their documentation's impeccable. Except for now, we can't get any documentation for anything because the radios aren't really designed to be sold on to the public. So you've got to sort of delve around a bit inside to find out whether you're old or later, and then there's no guarantee that the modules that are inside them are still the same as the original modules, or when they were built you can get a mix. So when they go back to, there's a place in the States, I can't recall, Fort something or other, it was like a radio signals servicing site, and everything went through there, and so they go, oh, you need 3 of these, 3 of those, and they pick the compatible sets, and they load up the radio and off it to go, and be, you know, deemed serviceable, it will go out again. But they might have pulled, you know, effectively modules out of 1,000 radios that they'd serviced before to produce that radio. So it's a bit of a lucky dip, I suppose, as to what's inside. There's a few modules around the States, but not many. And then the ITARS thing, exporting military stuff, makes it a bit of a problem. But there were quite a few in Australia, and I think I was selling for $1,000, $1,500 in the day when they were selling them off. So yeah, it's quite good, quite a nice find. So yeah, mid to late 60s into the 70s is that sort of era. And again, there's a bit of info up there about them, but quite a nice radio. I think when they're working well, they'll probably be quite consistent. But like everything, everything's aging, and you know, so other radios have, you know, tantalum issues. These ones have transistor issues. But it'll be a bit of a major exercise to go through and retransistor the whole damn thing, and fix them as they go. And that's basically it. I think I've never had it turned on. It's been sitting on the shelf for about 10 years since Steve brought it down one time. And I thought, well, this is a good excuse to get down and give it a clean up and see if we can get it going. So that'll be a job for another day. And my Land Rover actually moves. But it only runs on, but it only runs on 5 cylinders. And it's not a 4, it's a 6. So what I'll end up with is that'll go into the Land Rover. Oh, it's 24 volts, 28 volts. So the Land Rover would have had a generator on originally for that, and there is one in New South I can get down. So I'll set a few of the radios up in that Land Rover that way. When it's raining like this and it's got a hard top, it means that it'll be a lot easier to operate and I won't have to cut all this stuff around. The Land Rover's got a little bit of military history. It belonged to Peter Pickering, who was the light horse historian up at the barracks. He unfortunately conked out about 5 years ago, 7 years ago. So yeah, when he changed Land Rovers, so I bought that off him now. I bought it actually to go to Brisbane, and the guy I was selling it to in Brisbane, I actually bought it for my mate in Brisbane. I ended up buying it back off him, or swapping him some gears, I think. In between me getting it for him and him thinking about getting it up there, he'd bought another 3 Land Rovers. And so I don't think I really need any more Land Rovers. And I went up to see him for his birthday back in March, and we went out to his sheds, plural. And so here's the Land Rover shed, and we walk in and there's like 3 of the new ones, like the ones that are just going out now. There's 2 Series 1s, and there's Series 2A and there's Series 3. And I went, no, you don't really need any more Land Rovers, mate. And so, but he's a big military collector. He's much bigger than me. He's, you know, like this is 5% of what he's got. Yeah. But the funny story about the GRC-106, he rang me up one time. He said, oh, things aren't good. I said, what's wrong? He said, oh, I've got the cops on my case. I said, why have you got the cops on your case? Oh, we had GRC-106 in the Landy the other night. And he said, we went out in this car park, and he's sort of like in the middle of Brisbane. Yeah, like, here's the guy's about the equivalent of Newtown from here. Anyway, he said, I was up there, and you know, him and I can't remember the other guy's call sign. He said, we're there mucking around, we've been playing radio for about an hour and a half on the GRC. He said, yeah, things are going really well, talking to lots of people, it's great. And he said, and we get this bang on the window of the Land Rover, and it's the cops. And he goes, oh, hello, how can I help you? He said, no, it's not how can I help you, it's how you can help us. Can you turn that damn radio off, please? You're putting all the burglar alarms around the place. It was a state of chaos, and they were just getting constant call-outs.
Oh, stunning.
Yeah, so bad case of RFI. Yeah, so yeah, that's another
I
story.
guess that was the least of their concerns on the battlefield.
Oh, yeah. We've got an army guy working with us at the moment, and talking to him about the battlefield situation these days is really, really interesting. He talks about the communications from a loft, and you sort of go, what do you mean? And it seems that Australia bought, there's a military satellite network, this is common knowledge, I'm not telling any secrets. There's an American military satellite network that is geostationary, and we paid for one satellite, which gives us access to all of the satellites and the ability to change beams, to put spot beams where you want them, which is really incredible. And so he's talking about how the gear they're running now, I have no idea what it is, but the way that the battlefield has gone, all the gear is meshable. So as people move around, you come in and out of the mesh, and as you come into the mesh, you extend it in that direction. And if you've got a situation where you don't actually just shift the antenna, you shift the person or the vehicle up to somewhere that's got a better elevation, and they extend the mesh out. So the whole battlefield communication scenario moves around as the operations move. And when you think about it, it's like it's organic. It's a really neat way of doing it. And then they've got links back to either up there or back to the local command centre. And you sort of ask about bandwidth, and they're a bit hesitant on it. It doesn't really talk that much about it, but it's good enough that you will know if somebody's oil pressure is going off in their vehicle, or if they're getting low on ordnance, or there's something else happening they need to know about, and the system can get that through to them and provide alarms for them. So they've actually got situational awareness, but they've also got mechanical, physical awareness as well. There's stuff around them.
Yeah,
and automatic reordering of weapons and ordnance and stuff.
Sounds like if you can stick a sensor on it, you can report on it.
People's bodily functions,
Sure,
like
yep.
heart rates, body temperatures, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So if they're cold, you don't bother to pick them up, I suppose. Sorry.
I know that's true. I know what you just said is right.
It's true. Yeah. It's all about resources. It's amazing.
And it's all internet protocol.
Yeah, it's all IP. Yeah. So yeah.
And
Yeah, that's the other thing too that's changed immensely. We were talking about earlier that ITARs, which is I think that's the right term. ITARs, so basically the
weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction, or anything that could be used by the bad guys. And I reckon there'd be a lot of that in Afghanistan at the moment that probably didn't get knocked off before they left. Which means there'd be other agencies going to look at it and collect it up and take it home. It's really restricted what you can buy and what can get shipped. And often it's like there was some just 115 volt primary high voltage transformers you'd run in linear, I think they were even Henry or something like that. And they've got an ITAR classification not to export out of the States, which is pretty bizarre. And stuff that was even sold into Australia in a day, you can't bring out now, which makes it a bit hard to keep some of this gear going. But also it tends to limit what you can get, because some of the later Harris radios, PRC-138 maybe, they're really tricky, and they'll cover from 1.5 megs up to well up into megahertz in one radio, and you can do really neat data, and you've got multiple different modulations with them as well. So they're just they're like a 746 in a box, except they're a military radio, and they're about the size of the QMac. Really, really clever, but they're not to come out of the States. And what they threaten if you do export them without a license is not very pleasant. So I think that what we'll see is the availability is going to diminish, and also a lot of the contracts now are for whole of life. So when the stuff is supplied, the agency that gets it uses it, and then when they finish with it, it goes back to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer destroys it. And so it's there. So it just takes that whole equation. There's no such thing as a disposal store anymore, if that's the right word. Interesting times.
Which is a bit sad.
It's very sad, yeah. But then I suppose a lot of this equipment would be that complicated that unless you've got the supporting software and the systems to support it, then it's pretty hard. Even some of the stuff out of the 80s we have trouble with.
I'm also guessing that it would, the whole of life stuff would be to maintain the obligations under waste electronic recycling as well.
These Barrett manpacks are SDRs, and you get it, and there's a list of options, and you say, do you want this do you want that? Just tick the options and they just enable them, and after the event, if you do want the extra ones, you pay the difference and you get the extra options you get. But they've got an ATU building, they're about 20 watts, or you put them in the cradle for a vehicle, they're 50 watts, and they're the same core as the, that's a 2090, the manpack, 2050, same core as the 2050, which is the 125 watt, just general purpose radio for vehicles or cars or boats or whatever. And it's got a 1 kilowatt or 500 watt option as well. So they build on families, it's the same as this stuff. It's really not much different, it's just that they're STRs. Yeah, you haven't got flexibility. Well, no, you've got flexibility if you've got access to it. If you haven't got access to it, you've got no flexibility. Okay, I think it's me. It's enough talking. Cup of coffee time.
Yeah, Dennis.
Oh, a bit unprepared. I'll tell you what I know.
That's a good start.
I'll try. Rodney Chapters, you know,
Yeah, Rodney, yeah.
writing to Silicon Chip. He had a very good article on that FS6. I got it at home. Now, I didn't think about bringing any because I threw it all together this morning without any prior thought. But yeah, I bought that from Roach Brothers. They ran a ferry called the Morana. I think it was really a sister ship to the Cartier.
Was the Morana the one that ended up with the pub on the eastern shore? Just the stern of it there?
No,
Was the Oscar?
I understood it was, they took it out in Scotland.
Okay, might have.
I'm just working on memory. That was their backup radio. It was advertised in the Mercury about over 30 years ago. I saw it and I was very, very keen in those days in collecting, and so were a couple of others over the competition. And I saw it early on Saturday morning and rushed straight down there to Prince of Wales's Bay, up along the river a bit. And there was a bit of a lean-to shed off them at their main, rather rough-looking building. And a lot of old junk in there. It was mainly old canvas and ropes and stuff, and dust, you know. Very undisturbed. And that was in there with it. And it was their backup radio. They had to have a second transmitter on the ferry because it wasn't used to taking. It used to take people out mutton and things like that, like the Slocum Islands.
Yeah, okay.
Could you turn the radio around 90 degrees, please? And the camera can see it, and we can all see it.
So is that's AM-CW? Is it amplitude modulated and CW or just CW? Morse?
No, it's speech and speech.
So AM-CW, okay.
It's got a Morse key and its own speech.
Yep.
It's really in two sections. One, you got the receiver, which is fairly basic. What I read, fairly basic CBET receiver. I think the operating frequency, what is it? You see it, work it out. But it's about 3 meg or 6 meg or something. They were used during the Second World War. In fact, Roach Brothers told me it was probably used on the Kokoda Trail.
Really?
I verify that.
Yeah, well that makes sense because
They probably use radios of this type.
Yeah, but in that era when you bought it, the HF channels for radio, there's like 2524, 4125, 6280. I can't remember. That's a bit rusty. It's a long time ago. But they haven't changed very much. There's been a bit of a rationalisation, so it wouldn't make sense.
As far as ranging, so Ken told me here that a lady at the postmistress, I think at Morana Island, used it to communicate back here.
Yeah.
So it's got a bit of range. It is the power supply, and it's a vibrator power supply that works off, I take it a 6-volt accumulator. We'll take the cover off and have a look if you like. It's pretty straightforward. It's got another transformer there, which I thought might have been to break down 240. So it could work on 240 as well. I'm not sure of that. A bit of a look at the show. It's practically all complete. I've got the microphone, the antenna, and a cover. There's a metal cover goes over the front. That's at home. It's used for another purpose to put things in. And there's also a metal box to put the 12-volt accumulator in it. That's got other things in it at home with a nice strong lid on it. And That's most of it.
Your comment about putting stuff in things is...
I think the transmitter, for the time, you know, well, it's not really rocket science as far as I know.
Now, years ago, there were a couple of Collins 208 U10 10 kilowatt linears came out of the division.
Yeah.
I tried to track them down, and I got pretty close, but I lost interest when I was told they were bought by a bloke who had a garage, and he bought them to take all the internals out just to use the cases as cupboards. So, you know, like, yeah,
now,
things often get repurposed.
The servers, you've got a little door opens up here, which gives you easy access to the valves around the front. So if think you've got quick reason to change one, I suppose in an emergency situation, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 valves. I suppose that one's a transmitting valve, is it, the big one?
With the top,
Yeah. Keep your finger away from it.
Yeah, so you can see that it would have been man transportable.
Yeah, it
and
took about 3 men, they told me.
Yeah, and everything's got covers so that it's protected from the elements.
Yeah. Everything got covers, and the cover goes over the front here.
Yeah, that's great.
And I've seen pictures of it, like photos of it. There's a bit of information about on it. And they had one antenna that looked like a big umbrella with the fabric taken off it. It sort of opened and closed up.
Oh, top loaded, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and what they were used, I worked with a bloke, this is going back about 1990, with Hydro, and he said that he'd been in the Army Cadets or Reserves 10 years or so before that, I take it, and that they did use them there for training purposes. He came round once, I showed him, and he seemed to recognise it. I've got all these cables that join it and that. They're all at home.
Yeah, good.
And that's all I know. This one here is sort of a predecessor, and there's other people here who know more about it than me. A chap came here to the club a couple of years ago. He came from Gretna, he was a radio ham, and he was offering it round to sell it. I bought it off him. Well, I missed the power supply. I probably could have got that out of him too, but
that's a 120. That's a 122, isn't
it? Yeah. I don't really know much about it.
They're late 40s, early 50s, aren't they?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there was a 22 set before that. Yeah. And I can't remember whether that was based on the British design or not.
It's got a little generator in there.
Yeah, motor generators.
The difference between the 62 and the 122, I think one was crystal locked and the other one was VFO.
VFO, yeah.
And then there was the 28 set, which is a sort of a backpack compatible thing. It was the same sort of era.
Yeah, backpack with a horse.
The ranch part of the cylinder transmitter on the back of the ute out there,
yeah.
and a couple of early frequency meters.
Yeah, I had a 122 and a 22 from Dave Thorne. Dave Thorne was a mad collector, yeah. And I bought his estate for a few things that I particularly wanted, and a lot of that went to Ray Robinson and some to Queensland. So I suppose that's been distributed out. Just sort of on this talk about how different companies made things. There was a radio, an R390A, which was a high quality military comms radio. And it was originally made by Collins, but then as the pressure came on, they had other agencies making them. So in the same way as these contracts went through for this General Dynamics radio.
Yeah, this is AWA, isn't it?
Yeah. And Helena Rubenstein, the cosmetics company, built R390As, and they only built like 7 or 10 or 15, and they're really, really rare. But it was this contract towards the end of the production of that radio. How a cosmetics company would build radios, I don't know, but they obviously must have had some sort of machine capability. But yeah, it's just sort of one of those quirks of
they would have had a good
history.
foundation for it.
Good foundation. Very good.
Real smooth.
I think. Did you just make up that joke on your own? I think so.
Okay.
Must have been
Over to you, I reckon, somehow, Justin, on that note. I don't think anybody can top that. I suppose foundations you can't do on the bottom.
Fantastic, thank you. Can we just show our appreciation?
Yeah.
I have a slight our appreciation.
Thank you, sir.
I hope you.
Oh yes.
Hope you can make use of that.
Oh, I'm sure I can.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm not sure, I'm seeing sun outside, but that doesn't usually mean much. We might retire to the outside and see...
We can load the stuff out, whether we put it up.
That's probably the best bet. So we can have a look at the antennas out if the weather's kind to us.
So yeah, and like the basics of these antennas, when you're next operating portable or you just go away camping or whatever, just keep it in mind because it will work and it's proven. That's the thing that surprises me.
Absolutely.
Ray does anything.
Like they're not reinventing the wheels. Stuff that these guys are doing it and using it, and they want performance because somebody's going to nail them if they don't get it through in time. Yeah, it's quite remarkable.
Well, it's a bit scary being the radio operator because you're the one with the antenna out your back, and so you're the target.
That's why I love Peter's antenna on a helmet. You know, if you think,
Oh, that's brilliant.
yeah. RF detection and a rifle.
No, but there were another 7 guys with that, so you...
Well, that's okay.
So which one?
Yeah, just you need a bigger magazine. That's all that means.
I said to him it might be NVIR, you know, with it. Anyway, that is fantastic. So we'll head out and see what we can have a look. So, thank you.